You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Andy, how are you, my friend?
Good, my friend. I literally just got in my inbox. I'm a big fan of memes. The nice memes, not the mean memes, but the nice memes. So I just got one in the box that had Back to the Future, and it's got the DeLorean, and on it says, Marty, whatever you do, don't go to 2020.
Well said. I guess was that Doc or somebody else that said that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Doc said that. So I think, we're near the end of the year. It's been to say it's been a challenge and all these things we've been saying is just understatements, It's self-evident it's been a challenging year. But as the Footwear Industries podcast, we're always trying to bring on industry leaders to share their perspectives. And what's so great about the industry is that everybody has a different perspective. They sell different types of products. They're in different locations. They're in different channels. And so what we try to do is bring on industry leaders to share where they're at, where their perch is, and what they're seeing in the marketplace. So who do we have today?
Yeah, that's right, Andy. So our next guest is no stranger to the footwear industry and is a leader through and through in so many ways. And that's Mark Lardie, who's president and CEO of Rack Room Shoes. Mark, welcome to Shoe and Show. We are so excited that you've joined us today.
Thanks, Matt. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so let's cut to the chase. We have a broad array of listeners, Mark, and some probably shop Rack Room religiously and off Broadway religiously. But for those who may be in locations where you don't have a store or maybe overseas, give folks a rundown of the Rack Room shoe story and kind of your footprint, if you will, nationwide.
Yeah, we participate in about 37 states around the country. We have a little over 500 stores, and so we have a pretty deep penetration. We certainly have focus across the southern part of the United States, although we reach pretty far north in certain communities. We're pretty uniquely focused against suburban families, with obviously focus against mom, the target spender in that group. And so you would find us generally in suburban locations where she might shop for herself and for her family. We've been in business for a long time. We have deep roots in all the communities that we do business in.
Yeah. And so if I'm a shopper and I'm going to a Rack Room in, let's say, outside Charlotte, right? And what's the typical array of footwear that you have that's selling, and kind of what should folks expect as they walk into one of your stores?
We would talk about our assortment as a curated assortment of sort of trend right products for that suburban mom and for her family. We know what's trending and what's trendy, but we also know what's right, for our family. And so we try to be focused against that. We have a reasonably large footprint. Average store is about 6,000 square foot. And so we can do a pretty good job of a pretty broad assortment. But again, we stay pretty focused and try to stay in our lane.
I think what's interesting is what Mark is saying, and this is what people need to really cue into, is he's talking about a specific target audience, suburban moms. So obviously Rack Room and Off Broadway know who they're trying to reach, focus around that. And I think that's one reason why they're so successful in doing so, because I think so many people out there are just shotgun approaching it, right? They're just trying to go after every single thing possible. And it seems like, Mark, you guys are really focused on that. Kind of, as we know for a fact, because we're all living it, each individual listening to the show and everywhere else, e-commerce has absolutely exploded. Does all the data that you guys can collect online, just like you've been collecting in stores and as you're focusing on these suburban moms, how much more insight is that kind of data flow giving you guys compared to where we were even last year in 2018?
Yeah, that's all another great subject and super interesting. I mean, we historically do about let's say 84% of our business online is done within a 10-mile radius of our actual physical plant. So so we know that it's more typically a customer that's aware of our store and has sort of a trusted relationship with the brand, and then they find us online and when they want that sort of digital shopping experience. And take it from there. We also know from a lot of feedback that she uses that site as her pre-shop element now. And so we've seen diminishing traffic over the last decade, really, not corresponding with what's happened from a sales standpoint. And what's just happened is she's taken more and more advantage of this digital space to do her pre-shopping elements. And so that space, Andy, is important from a commerce standpoint for sure, and this year super important from a commerce standpoint. But we would say it's just as important from a brand image standpoint. And so while we try to extend our offerings there, lengthen the tail of what we can do, we still stay pretty jealously guarded in terms of what we show there. Just because someone would allow us to put more fashionable product on our site, extend the tail, they might hold the inventory for us. We still try to be, curated and edited and ensure that the products that show up in our digital space represent our brand and the values of our brand.
I think that's interesting too, because what you're talking about there is, people who may freak out about, there's not as many feet in the stores as there used to be, but you can directly tie that back to the digital side. So you don't have to be so fearful of what's happening. You just have to be smarter about what you're showing in order to entice them to come in. And there seems to be a balance is what you're saying between having the store and having the e-commerce platform. But as we go forward, have you guys been having, and I know you have, but have you guys been having a ton of conversations about what the storefront looks like in the future after COVID? Is it going to be, are we going to see smaller footprints? Are we going to see larger footprints? What are you guys thinking about as we move forward in terms of retail space and locations and things like that?
Yeah, there's so many different camps in terms of trying to figure out, are we immediately going back to where we were? No one really believes that. Have we changed everything forever? I don't think anyone really believes that. And so we're trying to navigate and guide ourselves to what the right space is. Look, we know Our Lady has this great poverty of time, right? And so efficiency is really important for her.
Right. It's
not really fun for our store design team to worry about efficiency all the time, but it's what they have to do, right? They have to make sure that she can get in and get out of the store in an expedient way as possible, that she has to be able to keep control of her family while she's in the store. So sight lines are important, for example, and again, her ability to keep her eye on everything that's going on. Her ability to navigate the store pretty quickly is important as well. And so sort of sight lines as well as signage is really important to make those things happen.
That's interesting.
Those are all the things we've focused on leading into this pandemic. And it's really paid off. We've seen a great, very rapid rebound in our business. We're obviously privately held, and so we don't disclose a lot of numbers, but our rack room business has been terrific. And so even with, traffic down double digits, we've seen our actual business be very, very strong. And we think it's because she's comfortable that she can make a very efficient shop, get in the store, get out really quickly, feel safe while she's there. And those are the things we think will continue post-pandemic.
Yeah, those are some really thoughtful insights, Mark. Things I wouldn't even thought of, like sight lines and signage and all that kind of stuff. You keep talking about this word curate. So let's dive into the curation of what you provide both at Rack Room and off Broadway. And let's kind of do a compare and contrast before pre-COVID and during COVID. How do you decide what to curate between the two? Are there differences between the two different channels within your brick and mortar family, if you will? And then how has curation changed during the pandemic so that you can be agile enough to respond to these trends set on by a global pandemic?
Certainly, none of that has certainly been easy, but I would say I would start by sort of the preambles, what our teams were charged with historically. And I will tell you, it's a frustrating challenge for merchants. We have historically all spent a tremendous amount of money sending our merchants really around the world. They shop Europe 4 times a year. They spend time in China developing product. And so they're really aware of even the most cutting edge things that are happening in the footwear world from a fashion standpoint. And yet they're not often allowed to put those things into their mix. And so they know what's happening. They know what's coming. They do their best to convince us how far we can push the envelope in terms of fashion. But at the end of the day, we tend always to reel ourselves back in and stay focused on, again, this suburban mom and what she would be comfortable with. And we do that because we want her to be able to buy anything from our range. And again, part of our trusted brand promise that she could wear that to an outing with, her fellow school moms or anybody in the community. And it would be appropriate. It would be recognized as a trend on, but again, not trendy. So we keep her pretty safe.
Now, is there a difference between the two? Kind of, I guess let's back up and do a profile check on what is the off-Broadway kind of, what are you looking to do and provide and curate in off-Broadway versus rack room shoe? What's the, compare and contrast between the two?
Yeah, great question. Super tough time in the off-Broadway and the warehouse shoe concept. There is a place that we have more square footage. That has historically been a longer shop. That's a place where she was sort of interested in the art of the find. She liked to wander around and find a great bit, a great piece of fashion that maybe her friends didn't know, and she'd find it at a great price. And that's been heavily impacted in the pandemic. Certainly our off-Broadway business has been really tough. But we've really been down the path for the last 3 years to migrate that business into a more, I would say, sporty, casual, comfort place. And so we feel like we were a little ahead of the pandemic in terms of what was going to happen, but certainly not far enough to capitalize fully on it. And so that shopping experience, that larger store, again, that had a higher fashion component to it, where there was, a desire for the customer to spend more time shopping, that's been heavily impacted. And our goal as we move through this pandemic and into the new year is to continue to migrate the assortment there, again, into a sportier place, a more comfort place.
One of the things that, Andy, you may or may not know this, I had the opportunity to tour the off-Broadway shoe warehouse store at Concord Mills, just down from Rack Room headquarters. And just a stone's throw from Andy's hometown, Monroe, North Carolina. So,
how many shoes should you steal, Matt? How many shoes?
Only a couple pair. Not to worry. No worries, Mark. No worries.
It's hard to hide shoes underneath your shirt. Let's be honest.
That's right. It is hard to hide. But one of the cool things about going to that flagship store was to see behind the scenes of how a shoe store operates, see how it's connecting with customers. Of course, this was pre-COVID, but Rack Room is near and dear to my heart and Andy's heart because it is a North Carolina-based company. And so I know the team there is working really hard to navigate through the pandemic. But Mark, did you see, as things were reopening up, how difficult or challenging was it to kind of react to the different jurisdictions from a state perspective about, hey, you can open here, but over here you can't open, and this is what you need to do in this store versus that store? How did you kind of tackle the reopening process as we were coming out of the spring?
Yeah, that's was super challenging and super difficult situation. We feel very blessed to be part of a global company. So our parent is the biggest family footwear retailer across Europe, and we got the advantage of that as they lived through sort of the spread and the shutdown ahead of us. And so we got tremendous advice, really a full manual of the things they recommended that we consider as we were going into shutdown. So I would say we got a really nice early playbook. The trick for us, Matt, as you mentioned, is that in the United States, as opposed to Europe, there weren't countrywide protocols or recommendations in place. So literally, as we were going through the shutdown and then the reopening and then the long summer, and again, even now, each state, certainly governors, had a say. And unfortunately, even municipalities came in and wrote their own legal documents in terms of what their requirements. And in a few states, Texas particularly comes to mind, where individual judges actually issued decrees and warrants that we had to follow. And so we had, as I'm sure most larger chains, we formed a committee around our reaction, and then we had parceled out leaders to handle different parts of that. And so, obviously, we had to ensure that our associates were safe before we reopened any stores, and so we had to do the work with the plexiglass and the signage on the floors to make sure we practice proper social distancing and we could maintain safety for our associates. And then we had to put obviously the right cleaning materials in place so they could execute against that. We needed backup plans, Matt, as you can imagine. If we did come up with an infection, we had to have the store professionally cleaned before we would allow either our associates or customers back in the store. And so there was a lot of things happening in the background from a technical standpoint. But just as importantly, we had a team that was responsible for just sorting through all of those individual municipality rulings. And
right.
And there was a point, I can remember a point one day where 27 different things came in. from the city of Memphis to the city of Nashville in the state of Tennessee, all three had different things going on. The governor is telling them one thing, the mayor of those two cities were telling them completely other things. And so we just had, multiple pieces that we had to go through. We committed ourselves to ensuring, first and foremost, that we kept all of our associates safe. And so we didn't reopen early in some places, or as soon as we could in some places, because we couldn't assure that we were fully prepared. And so we didn't do that until we were fully prepared. So our first focus was to keep our associates safe. And then obviously conjoined to that was to ensure that anything we did kept our customers safe. If they came into our store, we wanted to ensure that we had all the pieces in place. And then part and parcel to that was to ensure that we were also following any state or local guidelines. So we didn't want to be the guy that was pressing the envelope. And, we know some people that took some chance and pretended that they were, a necessary retailer through this process. And we tried our best, as we always do, to play it exactly by the rules. And again, also with an eye towards making sure safety was first.
I think this is an instance where when we think about our legal teams in retail and in brands, on the brand side, it's a lot about counterfeit and IP protection and things like that. And retail, some of the times we just consider our legal teams around signing leasing documents and making sure we dot the T's or cross the T's and dot the I's. But here you got legal teams having to look at municipal jurisdictions like they'd never had before, figuring out PPP, all the legalities, all the potential lawsuits from consumers coming into stores over COVID, if God forbid that happens, all these liabilities. And so maybe we should take a step back and just thank our legal teams.
Yeah, here.
A lot. One of the heroes of the industry having to step up to the plate and deal with these things and make their own rules and guidelines on the fly. I mean, that's extremely difficult. I'm sure Peter Barr's fingernails are chewed down to the bits after all this.
Peter had many challenges through this. I think it's interesting though, Andy, and yes, Peter and his team earned their keep certainly in this time frame. But it's interesting as they weighed in most cases, these, and I hate to even say this publicly, but these decrees did not have a lot of legal power associated with them. Right. It wasn't like that they could, come in and, fine you millions of dollars or do things that could keep you out of business for a long time. We really viewed them more as doing the right thing for customers in those particular counties or cities or states. And so we bowed to the authorities that they were doing the right thing. They were getting the right professional advice from their medical advisors on what should happen in those communities. And that's really why we followed those independent local decrees more than the threat of any legal action, as we really wanted to do the right thing for our communities.
Right. Let's talk really quickly about takeaways from this year. We've always talked about the challenges and issues, but I have to tell you, I love curbside. What are some other takeaways as you guys look to see how you guys were servicing your consumers? You said, in particular, suburban mom, she has to have efficiency of time. Does that mean that Rack Room's going to continue curbside even after we get, vaccinations and into the future? Are you guys thinking about making things like that permanent, implementing more ways of creating efficiencies for your consumers?
Yeah, we were surprised, frankly, how easy it was to execute on that. And when we started talking about it in March, it felt like that was going to be a difficult technical task. The pieces that the team was asking our IT group to deliver on, and then also from an execution standpoint for our store associates to execute on. And in a matter of weeks, we had a technical solution that was smooth. We think smooth based on what our customers have said, smooth for the customer and really easy for our sales associates. And then their ability to execute. We have numerous compliments from our customer base with regards to how quick and responsive they were. So you get a technical solution that works. You get the sales force that embraces it. And then you get a customer that, as you suggest, Andy, that likes that experience, and that's just a winning proposition. So, yeah, for sure, that'll be embedded in our go forward, how we do business. Again, as you suggest, we're awfully pleased how easy and smooth that is, just to layer on another piece of, as you suggest, again, helping her with her poverty of time and continue to be sort of a trusted part of her shopping life.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, this has been a fascinating conversation, Mark. And as we pivot to 2021, are you bullish? Are you bearish? Somewhere in between? How are you feeling about the new year?
That's a great question. We just had our final budget sign off with our parent yesterday via video conference. And we have, as probably everybody should have, a relatively conservative plan in place for next year. We have tight controls over everything. But we painted a pretty optimistic picture for our owner that we think with the disposable income where it's at, where savings have gone, where household expenses gone with refinancing. I know, Matt, you'll know more than us, but we believe a stimulus happens either soon or certainly in the new administration. We think all those things bode really, really well. We've got our fingers crossed that the vaccination rolls out as fast and smoothly as it's been predicted, and we get some return to normalcy by the second half of the year. So, we're in our plan. We're pretty tight as our partners, our vendor partners might tell you. We're pretty tight in our planning process, but we're pretty optimistic in terms of what we think can happen next year.
I like it. I like that, Mark. Thank you for that optimism, because I'm going to hold on to it, and I'm going to let that echo in my mind as if things in the next few weeks go downhill before the vaccine can get rolled out. But I'm hearing more and more optimism around our executives for 21. So that's a good thing. What's also a good thing is Jasmine Pendergrass and her Fashion Footwear and Focus segment. So I'm going to bring in Jasmine. She's going to drop some kind of fashion trend on us. More than likely, Andy and I will be like miles away from it from a coolness perspective, but we will pontificate nonetheless. So Jasmine, what you got for us?
Yeah, so I ran across this article of this women's shoe brand, and it had like some new technology integrated in it where it had like a QR code at the bottom of it. So like, let's say there's a woman at the bar and she sees another woman and she says like, oh, where did you get your shoes from? She can lift her foot up and there's a QR code where it can be scanned, and she actually gets an incentive for sharing her QR code, and it takes the person directly to the page. So I thought it was an interesting thing. So one, do you think this is something that more brands will integrate? And then two, is this something that men do as well? As a woman, I think we all like, oh, where'd you get those from? But do men share where they purchase their footwear from as well? Is that like a thing?
Man, I don't know. Mark, what do you think? Do you think this QR code scanning on footwear is something that catches on, or are there other kind of tracking trends that you guys have your eye on as it relates to the retail space?
Well, we think about it very differently than Jasmine mentioned it. Although that's an awesome application, but we wouldn't have thought about that. We think it more about gray market things, right? That's how we think about it. That particularly branded athletic vendors, but even our important non-athletic partners. There continues to be a gray market out there that needs to be protected against. And QR code is a great way. You can scan that pretty quickly and recognize whether a product is real or fake, and also where it originated from to ensure that this transshipping and gray market gets shut down. So we've thought about it more from that standpoint. But Jasmine's suggestion is really, really clever, and it's a really easy way to think about that. With regards to men making those decisions or concerned about that, I don't think that's the case for adult males. We certainly feel that with teens, though. That their ability to tell their friends that they bought that shoe at a particular retailer is important. It's sort of one of the ugly facts of us is like we talk about we over-index in terms of our penetration in the marketplace, sort of from birth until about 13, 14, 15 years of age, when they would like to tell their friends they bought their shoe from a really cool store, not from mom's, suburban family footwear store. So we'll under-index from about 15 to about 21 when money becomes important again as they get out of college, and then we start to over-index again. So Jasmine, that does happen, but it's really those teen years where it's important.
Okay.
I think of it differently in terms of like friction to find, right? This is my new thing in 2020. It's like, what's the friction to sell? Like how many clicks do I have to go through on a website to get to a purchase? How easy is it to find things? Is my credit card already included? Like all those fields that some big retailers are figuring out, where you just punch a button, you hit two buttons and you buy it, right? And it ships to your house. Everything's there. So there's less friction. there's still friction in trying to scan a QR code for me, especially if it's on the bottom of the shoe. And in some cultures, you don't want to show the bottom of your shoe to someone else.
That's true.
Kind of a no-no. It's one thing I did learn when I was working on foreign policy, especially with Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia. You don't want to do that. So maybe not in the Gulf. But I think more in terms of if I were gonna do it, I would integrate voice technology. Then I would just say, where did you get your shoes? And then you just simply hit your phone and hit the voice. Siri is going to be a lot better. Voice is going to be a lot better, where it's going to be very efficient to find things, where we no longer have to type it in. It's either telling our voice assistant to take a note or go straight to the website immediately and then hit a buy button, right? So that's what I think it's more seamless to talk than anything else. And I think more and more, not anytime soon, but in the future, voice will be more integrated into retail platforms. Not just home assistants like people think, I'm not going to say the name of the Amazons because it'll activate everybody's, or Google Home or whatever it is, but really functionally integrate into the back end of systems and be able to search and find things much more quickly by voice. We already see it on Google. You go to google.com to search on something. I don't even type in. I just go in there and hit the voice button and tell it what I'm looking for. And it finds it a lot faster. So I think in terms of technology around that, frictionless voice.
Well, that's all goes back to Mark's original point, right? This notion of poverty of time. I've never heard that before, and I think that taps exactly into it, whether it's efficiency in brick and mortar or it's, boiling it down to 2 clicks on your phone to buy something with your fingerprint. All of that is going back to that standard that Mark talked about, poverty of time.
Well, we're at poverty of time at this point, folks. We've run out of time. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your insights as an industry and our leader. We appreciate so much your continued involvement with FDRA.
Yes, amen to that.
Got our association, but also help set direction for the industry. Mark was on a call with us when we were talking about Fannie Market Weeks and what the future looks like. Had some extremely salient points about how to better optimize market weeks to help everybody do business better. And I think that's, as we looked at 2021, my new thing is not just to return to normal, but it's a better normal. So if everybody can just think in that terms of what we're trying to do and build, but what it takes people to sit at the table, like Mark and many other leaders, to sit there and set the direction, and allow the footwear industry's trade association FDRA to help chart that, guide that, and execute that. So Mark, thank you so much for your continued long-term support of FDRA and your guidance on the board. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy. Those are good sentiments.
Folks, this is Shoe and Show, the footwear industry's podcast. You can find us on shoeandshow.com and see our entire catalog of more than 250 shows. Drop us a line if you have any topical ideas you want us to talk about, or anybody you'd like to have us bring onto the show to chat about footwear. That's what we're talking about, the footwear biz. But as always, we really appreciate you guys listening. Always rate us 5 stars only. 5 stars only.
That's it. And everything else is thrown out.
That's right. We just delete it right off the bat. So, but we hope everyone out there is having a safe holiday season. Please be safe. Please stay healthy. Please keep buying shoes. Buy 2 pairs. And until next time, Shoein' is out.
Shoein' has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.